Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. I'm a volunteer with Nefesh B'Nefesh. I myself made Aliyah with them over 15 years ago. And here at Cafe Oleh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed. From paying bills to going grocery shopping to starting a conversation, meeting new people, um, all the everyday words that you use in English that you don't necessarily know in Hebrew. And if you're just starting out learning Hebrew, you're not necessarily going to learn, whether it's in Ulpan or in day school or in university or even in previous trips to Israel. So we really focus on everyday practical Hebrew here. You can see all of our previous lessons on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, write in Cafe Oleh or Nefesh B'Nefesh. You'll see a playlist of all of our previous lessons. You can watch all of them in full at your own convenience. This lesson will be up in the next 1 to 2 days. And as always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. So if you have ideas that we haven't covered in the past, or even you haven't looked and you just want to suggest one, please write to Nefesh B'Nefesh. You can also write here in the chat window if you're joining us live on Zoom. As always, if you have questions about the lesson we're about to go through, please write it in the Q&A window. And with the time remaining in this hour together, I will go through your questions about this lesson in particular. Any questions, any comments about anything else, please keep that to the chat. So today we're going to go over an equally important topic like all of our other previous lessons, which is clothing and apparel. It's not only because you've requested this, but it also comes up quite a lot. Having both learned Hebrew for many years, I know what words exist and don't exist in the lessons that you're getting, but also this comes from personal experience. Shortly after making Aliyah myself, I worked in retail, in clothing retail for several years, in management while I was in graduate school and keeping down another job. So I know both sides. I know both the words in Hebrew that I would have no idea knowing had I not had that experience. And I also know the frustration being an Oleh or even just a tourist here in Israel and not knowing the words for everyday things. So as that, I'm going to make this very clear like I always do. I'm not a human dictionary. There are some great dictionaries out there. Google Translate is not one of them, but we've discussed that in the past. As such, I'm not going to go through words you can easily look up in a dictionary. We're not going to go through skirt and dress and pants and shirt. We're going to go through those words in the context of them meaning slightly different words, words that come from Hebrew but aren't necessarily immediately understood, words that are not Hebrew but we use every day to describe basic clothing items, and a bunch of other things that are really unique to the Hebrew language and to Israel. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen. As always, you are welcome to take a screenshot, to do old school pen and paper and write down the words. Again, if you can't catch them all, you can get the recording of this on YouTube. You can pause it, you can freeze frame it, whatever you would like to get the full vocab list. You'll get it on YouTube if you don't get it in this hour together. So let's get started. As always, Hebrew is in the middle of the columns here with the dots and bars we call nikud, indicating vowel sounds, transliteration on the right-hand side, English on the left. We're going to go through these words together. So first, we're going to talk about what we're talking about, clothing, right? There's a couple important words. As always, we talk about a shoresh. A shoresh or a shoresh means root, R-O-O-T, and it's one of two foundations of every Hebrew word in existence. The shoresh are the three letters, sometimes two, sometimes four, that comprise the meaning, the basic meaning of a word. And from that, we derive all sorts of others. So in this case, bet, gimel, daled, as we see here in rows 2, 3, and 4, give us the words that mean clothing in some aspects. So first is beged. Beged is an item of clothing, one piece of clothing. Doesn't matter what piece of clothing, it's beged, is just one. And the plural is the word you probably know is bgadim. Bgadim are clothes or clothing, however you want to say it, but bgadim is the plural of beged. So if I was just going to describe my shirt, in addition to being the Hebrew word chultza, is also beged. It is one item of clothing. Everything I'm wearing is bgadim, okay? And then finally, we have the word apparel. Just like in English, we have the difference between clothing and apparel. I'm not going to get into this on this call, and specifically, we have this difference in Hebrew. In Hebrew, apparel is bigud, okay? It's the same root. Again, the difference between clothing and apparel. bgadim, bigud. All right, let's get into a verb you've probably heard before, no matter what level you're at. And we have a lot of people here at the intro level, which is great. Another very important shoresh that when we're talking about words about clothing is lamed bet shin. Lamed bet shin. From that, we get the verb you've probably heard many times, lilbosh. Lilbosh is the infinitive. It's to do something, in this case, to wear something, right? I wear a shirt, or I am wearing a shirt. Ani lovesh chultza. Okay, shirt is chultza, in case you didn't get that. Ani lovesh chultza. Very simple, I'm wearing something. Okay, lovesh, loveshet, lovshim, lovshot. This conjugates perfectly normally. You can go to our very favorite website, pe'alim.com. That's pealim.com to get a full conjugation. You can look it up in the dictionary. We're not going to do that here. We're going to go through other words that are equally important. You can conjugate on your own time. Another important verb that comes from this same root, and this is one of the beautiful things about Hebrew, in that we have a small amount of vocabulary, but we can create infinite new words based on this these two important parts of a word. We talked about the shoresh, the root that has one meaning, and then we have the binyan. Binyan means building, and the building are all the nikud, the vowel sounds, and the other extra letters that construct the word from that root. Right, so we plug in that root lamed bet shin into another form. Instead of lilbosh, we now have lehalbish. Lehalbish, anyone who gets to a more advanced level of Hebrew will recognize this as the causative form. It's called hif'il, and in causative means just like it sounds, to cause something to happen. In this case, lehalbish is the causative of lilbosh. So to cause someone to wear something, in regular English, we would say to dress someone up. Right? So someone who helps you get dressed, or if you help someone get dressed, that is lehalbish. Right? So someone, an assistant, for example, does this. Ha'ozeret hilbisha et halekocha. The assistant got the lekocha, customer, dressed, or dressed up the customer. Okay? That's lehalbish, the causative form of lilbosh, to dress someone up. And then finally, with our same root, lamed bet shin, and this is why it's so important beyond just lilbosh, because look at the nuances that we've been able to create with just this one shoresh, to wear, to dress someone. Now we have lehit labesh. Lehit labesh is the reciprocal, the reflexive, excuse me. It can also be reciprocal. In this case, it's reflexive. Lehit labesh, to get dressed. Kol boker, every morning, ani mitlabesh. I get dressed. Okay, literally, I dress myself. Okay, so from the same root, just like we had three different verb iterations with the previous root, bet, gimel, dalid, we now have three iterations with the shoresh lamed, bet, shin that have to do with getting dressed. Lilbosh, to wear something, lehalbish, to dress someone up, and lehit labesh, to get dressed. Okay, very easy. Efficiency, the efficiency of Hebrew is really important to state here. However, Hebrew is also, I said, is very conservative with a lot of vocab. It's also very, very specific in other ways. And our next group of verbs here, those of you who can see the color, our next 1, 2, 3, 4 verbs here are part of a family of verbs that take the verb lilbosh and go to the extremes. And by the extremes, I mean that certain articles of clothing have a very specific verb that goes with it. There are many more than these 4, actually 5 if we count lilbosh. These are the 4 that are most used. Okay, there are other ones. They are rarely heard in modern Hebrew, in everyday Hebrew, and that's what we're focusing on, right? I'm not asking you to speak in poetic, high-level Hebrew the moment you leave this class, but these 4 verbs are really important because we go through these all the time. You've probably heard some of these before. Certainly at least one of them I know you've heard in the last 2 years. Let's start with the first one, lin'ol. Lin'ol can mean both to lock something, like to lock a door, but in this case, it means to wear shoes, to put on shoes and to wear shoes. Ani noel na'alaim, I am wearing shoes. Okay, you do not in modern Hebrew use the verb lilbosh to wear something when it comes to shoes. Shoes, sandals, flip-flops, anything that goes on your foot as an item of clothing is lin'ol na'alaim. You see in the parentheses na'alaim, to further emphasize this verb is only used when it comes to shoes. You can say it footwear if that makes it more appropriate for some of you who don't like to wear shoes and you wear flip-flops or anything like that, or sandals, whatever it may be. Lin'ol is the verb that we use to put on or to wear shoes and footwear. Let me go through another one here. Lachbosh, or also pronounced lachabosh. This verb is used for any kind of head covering. Lachbosh kova. Right? Many of you have probably heard this in the context of wearing a kippah, a chovesh kippah, someone who wears a kippah. Okay, lachbosh kippah, to put on or to wear a kippah. Lachbosh kova, to wear a hat. Okay, again, a verb that is very specific in its usage, and it has to do with headwear, as opposed to footwear, which is lin'ol. Lachbosh or lachavosh is headwear. It's both kova, hat, kippah, many other forms of what you would put on your head. A fascinator, if you will, if you like British royal style. Anything that goes on your head is used with the verb lachabosh. Excuse me. Another one, this is the one you've probably heard before in the last 2 years, a very often used one is la'atot. La'atot is used for masecha, a mask, right? Before this, we used that with regards to Purim, to holidays, to getting dressed up for any sort of costume. Now it refers to the mask that many of us have worn, hopefully worn when asked to, or even encouraged to do so in the last 2+ years. La'atot masecha, to wear a mask. Okay, so now you know it. We've gone through this topic quite a bit in the past. Always worth going on a review, especially in the context of clothing. And finally, the last of these 4 special clothing verbs is laharkiv. Laharkiv or laharkiv means a lot of different things. It means to install. It means to create a government. But in this case, it means to wear glasses. They can be mishkafayim, regular eyeglasses. They can be mishkafei shemesh, which are sunglasses. I believe they can also be laharkiv adashot, contact lenses. The point, though, is these 4 verbs, in addition to lilbosh, are the verbs that we use in everyday Hebrew to describe the action of wearing certain items of clothing. Okay, and these green ones are really important. I don't want you going out and using the incorrect verb for an incorrect piece of clothing. These are really used in modern Hebrew. Even the native Israeli who butchers the language on a regular basis will use these 4 verbs. All the other ones, and there are many more out there, are really, what's the best word? Highfalutin. People rarely use those. These 4, along with lilbosh, are used all the time. Okay, let's go through some other verbs that are really important when it comes to clothing. And again, having worked in retail, I can promise you these verbs are used all the time when you're buying clothes or selling clothes. Lehitrachev. Lehitrachev comes from the word rachav, and we're going to have it again shortly. Rachav means wide or expansive. Lehitrachev is to expand or to loosen up. So if you're at a clothing store, you're going to want to ask if, for example, it's a very slim fit of something, and we're going to also go through how to say that. You're going to ask if the fabric mitrachev, right? Does the fabric expand with wear? Does it expand when you wash it, or does it do the opposite? The opposite of litrachev, row 16, lehit kavetz, to shrink or contract, right? If you're buying a piece of clothing, whether it's here in Israel or anywhere else in the world, you want to know if it is going to lehit kavetz bakvisa. Is it going to shrink in the laundry? Kvisa is laundry. Okay, lehit rachev and lehit kavetz are opposites of each other. Really important words when you're going shopping, asking if someone is helping you, asking ze mitrachev or mitkavetz. Does this expand or does this shrink? right? Some things are stretchy, some things are not stretchy. These are the two verbs you're going to use to understand the quality of that piece of fabric. Limdot. Limdot is obviously a very important one if you're in a store, or maybe you're not in a store, but you're looking to figure out if this piece of clothing is right for you. Limdot is to try on something, right? You're going to try on a piece of clothing. Limdot is the verb you're going to use. Again, all these verbs are in the infinitive. It's up to you to conjugate them accordingly. You can do that on your own with all the different resources we've given you here and in the past. Limdot is to try on a piece of clothing. Lirzot. Lirzot or lirzot, depending on how you say the letter resh, comes from the adjective razeh, which we're going to get to in a second. Lirzot is to become thin, right? You could say to someone both as a compliment or perhaps not as a compliment, ah, razita, you, male, got thinner, or you lost weight is another way to say that, okay? And the opposite of lirzot is lahashmin. Lahashmin comes from the same, has the same shoresh as shamen. Shamen is fat. So lahashmin is that causative form we talked about before. Lahashmin is to get fat, right? Or to put on weight, right? Because it's not necessarily that you put on weight is necessarily fat. It could also be muscle, but lahashmin is to get fat. Nicer way you could translate that is to get bigger, but it's really to get fat. Two very important verbs, lahachzir and lahachlif. And it's very important to understand the difference between these. And we've talked about this again, and I'm going to pronounce them again because in Hebrew, spelling is destiny. You cannot swipe out letters for other sounds, and you have to make sure that you are pronouncing things correctly because the slightest difference makes all of the difference. As you see here, these verbs start with the three same letters, and then they end with completely different letters. Because each one has a different shoresh, even though they may sound alike, they are very different. Lahachzir comes from the same root as lachzor, to return, and lahachlif comes from hachlafa, exchange. Lahachzir means to return something. Okay, versus lahachlif, which is to exchange something. We all know this, right? Whether we're in Israel or anywhere else in the world, the difference between returns and exchanges. If you don't understand what that means, please look it up. This is not that type of class. But just know, as we're talking about these things, the context of why this is important. In Israel, the law is, with the exceptions of things that are non-returnable, right? Like bigdei yam, swimwear, and tachtonim, underwear. Most items of clothing you can lahachzir, meaning you return in exchange for the money you paid for. You return for credit or for cash within the first 14 days of purchase. Okay, that's the law in Israel. It doesn't matter what store you're at. That is the national law in Israel. 14 days to return an unused item of clothing. Lahachlif, to exchange, is, let's say you bought something and you just want to exchange it for a different size, or you want to exchange it for a different color. That's lahachlif, right? We all know what that is versus lachzir. Lachzir is, I don't want this, I want my money back. Lahachlif is, I want to exchange this for something of equal or of different value, but I'm still going to get an item rather than the money for it. These are very important rules. Just know that in Israel, you can lahachzir. You can return things, most things, within 14 days of purchase. Everything after 14 days is usually available lahachlif, to exchange. And even then, it's usually capped at 30 days. So first 14 days after you purchase something, lahachzir. First 30 days, lahachlif. Okay, very important if you didn't know those laws already. And even if the store doesn't advertise that, that is the law in Israel. Sorry, just turning on the air conditioner here, that about lachzir and lachlif, very important verbs. Okay, let's get into some regular old nouns and adjectives when it talks about clothing. Size. Size is midah. Okay, size is midah. Fit is gizra. Again, if you don't know the difference between these two, please look it up on your own. Midah. In Hebrew, in Israel, rather, we use the same words that we use in English. We just give them a Hebrew accent. So small, medium, large. We also use the numbering system, and you'll see it goes back and forth depending on the store. Some stores will follow the American and British model, so they'll use inches. Some will use the European, which is centimeters. You'll just look at the tag. You'll figure out very fast if what the measurement is, but that is midah. Okay, midah, small, medium, large, and then a number if that's more relevant with regards to waist size or hip size, whatever it may be. Gizra is the fit, right? So for example, we're going to get to a couple different adjectives later, but skinny fit versus wide fit or relaxed fit. That is gizra, right? The shape of something, the fit, how it sits on you. The piece of clothing is gizra. That's not the same as midah, because you can have a skinny fit in large or a skinny fit in small. You could also have a relaxed fit in large and a relaxed fit in small. Two different things. Bad, fabric. Very important word here in Israel. Despite how good your air conditioner is, and I just turned on mine, which is wonderful. Israel, if you haven't been here in the summer, it gets pretty hot. You're going to want to know what fabric you are buying and wearing, because that does make a difference of your own comfort, as well as how you go about cleaning and taking care of a piece of clothing. I'm not going to go through all the different types, but just the big three are kutna, cotton, pishtan, linen, and tzemer, or tzemer, wool. Okay, these are the big three. All the other ones are usually cognates. So nylon is nylon, polyester, polyester. The only one I didn't include on here is meshi, which is silk. Otherwise, these are the big three when it comes to fabrics. Let's go through some adjectives when describing all of these various nouns we just went through. When it comes to the fabric, right, to the bad, is the bad that you're looking at is the bad of the bigud. Bad is, again, fabric, and bigud is the apparel, or beged, the piece of clothing. Is it dak or ave? Dak, row 30, is thin, and ave is thick. Okay, so dak or daka. Dak is masculine, daka feminine, because remember, all of Hebrew is gendered. So if we're talking about bad, which is masculine, right? Up here, row 25, bad is masculine. So you're going to ask if ha'im habad, is the bad dak or ave? Is it thick, thin, or thick? Okay, and if you were speaking about, let's say, a shirt, chultza daka or chultza ava. Okay, a thin shirt or a thick shirt, referring to the fabric. Okay, so these are the two most common adjectives you're going to use when describing the type of fabric: thick or thin. Thin, dak, thick, ave. Now let's talk about gizra, the fit, right? I talked about this before. I hinted at it before. Gizra tzmuda or gizra rechava. Tzamud means slim or skinny in this context of talking about the fit. Okay, so slim or skinny, let's say like skinny jeans or slim fit jeans or slim fitting shirt, is tzamud or tzmuda, depending on the gender. And a wide or relaxed fit, as we would say in English, is rachav or rechava. Okay, tzamud, tzmuda, rachav, rechava. Another two important pair of adjectives describing clothing words. This one regarding to fit. We did fabric. Now let's do body size. There's quite a lot of body sizes here, but we're talking about two, let's say, on the polar spectrum of things: razeh or razeh and maleh. Razeh we talked about before with lirzot, right? To become thin or to lose weight. Razeh and raza mean slim or skinny. This refers to body size, not to the fit of clothing. If you're describing someone's body image, body size, and they're skinny, this is the verb you're going to use, the adjective rather you're going to use, the adjective razeh or raza, depending on the gender. Okay, and then we have maleh and mle'ah. Maleh literally means full. This is the word that many people use, not all. Instead of saying gadol, big, we usually refer to midot dolot, big sizes. But when we're referring to someone who has a plus body size or full figured, we use maleh or mele'ah. Okay. There are exceptions to this. Some people will prefer to be called something else, but this is considered a more polite way to describe someone or the clothing that is made for someone who is full figured or plus size is maleh or mle'ah. Okay, again, body size, not the fabric and not the fit of the clothes. Now we're going to get into a group of words that, as I said before at the intro, are not of Hebrew origin, but they're used all the time in Hebrew. And the difference in how they're used in Israel versus their original origin is important because they're going to sound like words you already know, but they may not have the exact meaning. So it's really important to understand the difference between some of these, especially when it comes to certain items specifically for women or intended for women rather, that are used quite a bit. But the difference, because the Hebrew hasn't caught up with the non-Hebrew words that are used for them, is going to be important. Okay, first one is T-shirt. There are other ways to say T-shirt in Hebrew. Okay, you could literally say chultza ktsara, a short shirt. And you will see this, but you will also hear people simply say T-shirt. Right? They'll simply say T-shirt, or they're going to say tricot or tricot, but they're going to say it as a resh, so tricot. Tricot comes from the English word tricot, which is a certain weave of cotton that's often used in the T-shirts that many school children in Israel have to wear. Remember, in Israel, in public schools, particularly what we call mamlachti schools, so secular public schools, many students have to wear a uniform T-shirt, which is essentially a same color, or it's a small variety of colors with the school's insignia logo here at on the chest. And that's required T-shirt that they have to wear every day, and they usually have to buy a set of them and constantly wash them. And that weave of fabric is known as tricot. That word has trickled down into everyday use to describe T-shirts in general. Even though it describes a specific weave of cotton, tricot can be used for T-shirts in general. So you will hear people say tricot or chultzat tricot, a tricot shirt, but you'll also just hear T-shirt. Okay, both of these mean T-shirt. Tights. Tights is leggings. Okay, tights, the plural is tight seam. So a pair of tights is tights. More than one pair of leggings is tight seam. Okay, but just know leggings are tights. We're going to get to pantyhose in a second because that's a different word, but leggings are tights. Shleikis. Shleikis, some of you may have heard before, some of you may wear. Shleikis are suspenders or braces, depending on what English-speaking country you are coming from, but that is the term that we use in Israel. It is not Hebrew, but is the term that we nonetheless use in general. There is another word for it, but this is the word that we use in general, which is Shleikis. Okay, and going along with the Yiddish/German words that we use for things is gatkes. Gatkes is long johns or thermal underwear. This is an important word because Israelis love to go backpacking and hiking in extreme places around the world, or they're serving in the army and they're posted in very cold places, or you live in a cold place in Israel in the winter, like Yerushalayim, or up in the north, or in a mountainside. And you're going to want to get a pair of gatkes before the winter, or going backpacking in the Andes in South America because it does get cold. Okay, gatkes, regardless of gender, is long johns or thermal underwear. And then finally, a very popular item, especially where I used to work, got asked about this all the time, asking because it was the more popular item that we sold in the store was capuchon. Capuchon is how we say in Israel. It's not Hebrew, but in Israel is how we say a hooded sweatshirt, or that other word I never liked, hoodie. Okay, so a hooded sweatshirt or a hoodie, regardless if it has a zipper or not, is a capuchon. Okay, capuchon, capuchonim is the plural. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words with non-Hebrew origins that we use all the time in Israel, regardless if it's Hebrew or not. You'll hear these words used all the time. Now we're going to get into some words that are of Hebrew origin, but we've derived new words out of their original use. 43, tzavaron or tzavaron. In Hebrew, we have 3 different words to describe this part of your body. Garon, or garon, is the one you probably know, which is throat. But then we have a tzavar and an oref. Okay, garon is a throat. Oref is the nape of your neck, is the back of your neck, and tzavar is your neck. Okay, it's the front part of your neck. From that word, we get tzavaron. That on at the end we've talked about in previous lessons means something that's small. It's diminutive. In this case, tzavaron, a collar. Okay, so if you want to ask, does that shirt come with a tzavaron in another model? This is the word you're going to use, collar, tzavaron. Okay, from the word for neck, tzavar. Another thing I happen to be wearing right now is a mekufteret. Mekufteret is short for, as you see here in the parentheses, chultza mekufteret. Chultza is a shirt. Mekufteret comes from the word kaftor or kaftor. A kaftor, you can see right here, is a button. Okay, kaftor is a button. That can be on a shirt, that can be on your phone, that can be on your computer. Any button is a kaftor. Kaftorim are buttons, or buttons, depending on how you pronounce that word. I say buttons. Mekufteret is something that is buttoned. In this case, a button-down shirt, right? So any shirt that has buttons is a chultza mekufteret. I, for example, only wear chutzot mekufterot. I only wear button-down shirts, or ani tamid lovesh mekufteret. I always wear mekufteret, a button-down shirt. Right, so this word, you can just simply say mekufteret, and when it's used in the context of clothing, it's understood a shirt. It can't be confused for anything else because it's feminine, and it's referring to a chultza mekufteret. It's not referring to pants. We'll get to that word in a little bit. Pants is a masculine word. Mekufteret is feminine, therefore I know it's referring to a shirt. Mekuftal could be something that is a button down that is masculine. By the way, you could totally use that, but mekufteret is the word that you're going to hear quite a lot that simply refers to a button-down shirt. We said tights before is leggings. Galbionim are pantyhose. Galbaim are socks. Galbionim are pantyhose. Okay, galbionim is one pair of pantyhose. Elyonit. Elyonit comes from the word elyon, upper, or above. An elyonit can refer to a, as we would say in America, cardigan, and in other parts of the English-speaking world, a vest. Okay. It can also, by the way, be a vest, like a vest that you would wear in a 3-piece suit for a man, but it also refers to a cardigan sweater. Anything that you put on that has buttons and can be removed but isn't this primary piece of clothing is an elyonit. Okay, so a cardigan, a shawl that has a fastener on it, and it's not just a scarf, or a vest that you would wear on top of a dress shirt, a mekufteret, if you will. Okay. Now, another word, this one you know probably already, but it's important to just emphasize, it comes from 2 other words. Beged, we already talked about, is an item of clothing. Yam is the sea. In Hebrew, you're going to hear both beged yam and bigdei yam. The only difference between these 2 is one is singular, one is plural, but in reality, they mean the same thing. Think of it like in English where we say swimming trunks or bathing suit, and we're all referring to the same thing, even though swimming trunks usually is only referring to what those who identify as male would wear versus bathing suit is more gender inclusive. Beged yam and bigdei yam mean the same thing. It doesn't mean that you're wearing a one piece versus a two piece or what kind of bathing suit it is, right? Is it shorts? Is it a Speedo? Is it a bikini? Is it a one piece? Is it none of the above? Just know that bathing suit can either be singular or plural in Hebrew. Beged yam and bigdei yam are both the same thing. Speaking of the word beged, another important one is beged guf. This is a very popular item of clothing here in Israel, especially among younger women. Beged guf is a onesie or a leotard. Okay, it's the same idea. Beged, a piece of clothing, guf, your body. So a body clothing literally translates to body clothes, right? Is a onesie or a leotard. Gufiya takes that same word guf and turns it into gufiya. Gufiya for the Americans here, that's a tank top, that both for men and women, by the way, of various lengths. For the British out there, it's a vest. And for the Aussies out there is a singlet. Okay, tank top, vest, singlet, especially as it gets warm here in Israel, all of them are one word in Hebrew, gufiya, popular for both men and women to wear. Tachtonim, we had the word elyonit before. Elyon means upper. Tachton means lower. And tachtonim is the word for underwear. Again, any kind of underwear for any gender is tachtonim. Okay, but we take the word for tachton, lower, and then we turn it into tachtonim, which is plural, regardless, again, what it comprises of and what its fit is and its fabric and its model and what gender it's for, it doesn't matter. Everything is tachtonim and refers to underwear. Again, for the Brits, pants, but for everyone, underwear. Okay, and if we're already talking about all these things, because it is getting warm out, is michnasaim ktsarim. Okay, michnasaim we didn't include before, but it's a word that you can easily look up on your own, are pants. Okay, michnasaim, by the way, because pants come with two legs, so it's always going to have the ayim at the end. Ayim, we've talked about before, means the dual. It indicates something comes in a pair. In this case, michnasaim, plural for pants. Ktsarim comes from the adjective katsar, short. Michnasaim ktsarim, shorts. Not shorts as in underwear, not as in boxer shorts. Shorts as in short trousers, if that's easier for some of you to think of. Right? You will also hear shortsim, just like you heard tightsim and those other words, but michnasaim ktsarim are shorts, as in short trousers. Okay. A couple other important nouns, not necessarily about the actual piece of clothing, but how you're going to go pay for these and what to expect when you are buying clothes, whether it's online or offline. Some of these words may be really simple for you, but we're going through clothing, so it's important to go through these nonetheless. First is Kabbalah. Kabbalah is a receipt. If you're going to lahachzir or lachlif, those two words we talked about before, if you're going to return or exchange something, you're going to need to be sure to hold on to the Kabbalah. Kabbalah, receipt. Also, to leave the store, in many cases, you need to show proof of purchase, which you get through a Kabbalah. Second, very important word, tag. Tag can mean both the tag, meaning the price tag, but also the label on the shirt or the whatever item it may be. Right, so if you're buying a shirt, a tag can be both the one in the back that indicates what size it is and where it was made and what's it made out of and its care instructions. But a tag can also be attached to the shirt, indicating the price. Okay, both words are used for those two different items that are integral to a piece of clothing. Mechir, or mechir, is the price. Okay, so on a tag mechir, on a price tag, you're going to find a mechir, the price. You might also find other information on it, like the size, like the fit. Okay, but mechir is price. Mivtza, we've talked about before. This is a very important word, especially in Israel, sale. Not selling a sale like I am selling something, a sale like a discount. By buying this, you're buying it at a cheaper price. That is a mivtza. Mivtza also means in a non-apparel context, a military operation or any kind of concerted or organized operation. But when it comes to retail and clothing, it refers to a discounted sale. Okay. And finally, a very important word when we're talking about all these different things is zikui. Right? We talked about this before when it comes to lahachzir something, to return something. Some stores will offer you zikui and some will offer you full cash. That's a very important thing to also be clear when you are purchasing an item. Is it zikui, store credit? That is what zikui means. Or cash back on your card or in bills if you paid in cash. Okay, zikui, store credit. Very important one. Also, you may have gotten a gift, right? You may have gotten store credit or a gift certificate, in which case you would have gotten zikui to go and purchase something. Okay, the next group of words are actually expressions or questions that are commonly asked by you, but also by people going shopping in person. It may also be with a virtual shop assistant, but the point is when you're using this in Hebrew, these are some common expressions that are used to get help, to get support. Not going into the full amounts, because we went through a lot of those words like midah and limdot and all these other words that are really important to help formulate how you go out and purchase things. These other ones are probably a little bit more general that you can also apply to a bunch of other places. And then I'm going to pause for questions. If you have any, by the way, and you incorrectly wrote them in the chat, this is your chance to write them in the Q&A. I will only be looking at the Q&A and only for questions that have to do with this lesson. So let's start. There are two different ways that a shop assistant or someone working in a store can ask if they can help you. Efshar la'azor lach or lecha, and efshar ezra. Okay, if someone asks you efshar la'azor lecha or efshar la'azor lach, depending on your gender, lecha to a man, lach to a woman, efshar la'azor lach means may I help you, and also they can ask efshar ezra, may I offer help? The offer is implied. It's simply asking, is help possible to be given to you, right? Ezra is help or aid. Efshar is the polite way to ask, may I or can I or is it possible? Both of these ways, if someone who works at the store is asking you, they're asking, can you help? They help you out. This next one is probably the most important one here in this group of words. This will set you apart from the person who's learning Hebrew and happens to be in Israel to a full-fledged Israeli. To master this word. Mistader and mistaderet. These are really important words. When asked as a question, they mean, are you doing all right? Are you finding everything all right? I wrote in very fancy English here, are you managing all right? But it's really asking, are you doing all right? In the context of finding what you need. Mistader, male, or mistaderet, to a female, is a question. And then the answer, either to this or to the previous question, if efshar la'azor lach or efshar ezra, you can simply say, for me, lo toda, no thanks, ani mistader. I am doing all right. I am managing. Or a woman would say, mistaderet, ani mistaderet. Okay, really important word. Mistader and mistaderet. This comes from the same root as seder, seder, we did just over a month ago, as well as biseder, or okay. Mistader is I'm doing all right, not ani beseder. That's a different thing. That is I'm okay. Mistader is that I'm managing okay. I am organized. I am managing all right. I am finding everything I need, or I am doing all right, i.e. I don't require assistance. Okay, you can answer this, also use this in other contexts that aren't just about in a store or in a shopping set, context, like at work. Ani mistadel, I'm doing all right with my tasks, or I'm managing my tasks, right? Mistadel, mistaderet, I'm doing all right. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing great or you're doing really badly. It just means that you're doing what needs to get done. Okay, really important word. You're going to hear this a lot. You're going to hear this from other shoppers. You're going to use this word, and you're going to use this word outside of a store as well. Mistader, masculine, mistaderet, feminine. When asked as a question, mistader, mistaderet means, are you doing all right? And as a statement, mistader or mistaderet means, I'm doing all right. Now, the flip, instead of the person working for the store asking if you need help, is how do you ask for help? Slicha, efshar ezra, or slicha, efshar la'azor li. Either of these ways, you are getting someone's attention by saying slicha, excuse me, and then efshar ezra, you're using that same question we had beginning, excuse me, but you're asking it to the person working there. Could I receive assistance? Could I receive help? May I receive help? Slicha efshar ezra, very polite, very courteous. Or to be more direct, slicha efshar la'azor li, excuse me, could you help me? Right? Instead of asking, could I get help in a very general sense, now you're asking very specifically, could I get help? Slicha efshar la'azor li, to help me. Okay, either of these, perfectly all right, gender inclusive, don't need to conjugate any more than they're written there. Okay, these are the polite ways to get someone's attention. If you are someone in, regardless of language, who snaps their fingers or do anything else, please stop and use one of these two sentences immediately, or just in general. And then finally, an important one, if you're trying to find out how long a store is open. Ad matai ptuchim. This obviously goes for much more than a store. This could go for your marpeah, your healthcare, your clinic, an office of any kind, or anything like that. Slicha, ad matai ptuchim, or simply asking ad matai ptuchim, until when are you open? Ad matai, until when? Ptuchim, are you open? Plural. Okay. There are obviously many more questions to be asked. These are ones that can't necessarily be constructed with the words that we had before, but certainly taking the word efshar, the polite way to ask, can you do something? And the verb limdod, where was limdod? Right here, efshar limdod is how you would say, can I try this on? Right, efshar, the polite thing, limdod, to try on. Okay, and all these other words. Really important. Okay, I'm going to stop here. So I see we have a bunch of questions. But again, these are really important words we use all the time when it comes to clothing and to buying clothes in Israel and selling clothes. There's a lot of vocab here, I know, which is why please go onto YouTube in the next few days. Once this lesson is up, you'll be able to go back and review all of this vocab on your own time. Okay, let's get started. Lehitrachev, is that also used for stretch? Yes. Hagumi mitrachev, the rubber band gets stretched, right? Lehitrachev is to get stretched or to become loose. Where was it here? To expand, to loosen up. It can also mean to stretch, like to stretch out. Steve, would limdod also mean to measure? Yes, Steve, great point. Limdod also means to measure. Efshar limdod li, could you measure me? That is also what you would say. But also efshar limdod, as I just said, means to try something on. Okay. Is there another word for a vest? Steve asks. You will hear vest used. In that case, vest is used as the button-down vest like you would see in a three-piece suit for a man. That's what it would say when we say vest. Remember, most of these words, Hebrew and Israel in general, are skewed towards American culture lately, even though we have a lot of vestiges from British English because of the British mandate. A lot of it is this weird amalgamation, right? So we have tights, we have capuchon, which is not even English, and vest and vestim, but vest is really referring to a formal fancy vest, not what we would call in America a tank top. Ava asks, would beged guf also be a unitard catsuit? Yes, great question there, Ava. It is also a unitard or a catsuit or a leotard or a onesie. anything that is one piece of fabric that you wear as a full piece, right? You may wear things over it, but it's that idea that it adheres to your goof. It is a piece of clothing, beged, that adheres to your goof. Rami, Goofy on T-shirt are not the same. Thank you for asking that. They are absolutely not the same. Goofia, as we said here, Goofia is a tank top, a vest, or a singlet. Those are the words that we use. It's also called an A shirt. Those are a tank top, right? It has those skinny strips at the top on your shoulder, and they usually have a rounded, deep neck with no sleeves. That is a gufia. A t-shirt is a t-shirt. T-shirt is t-shirt, meaning it has short sleeves. Gufia does not have sleeves whatsoever. So no, they are not the same. Thank you for asking. Rhonda, how do you say money back or refund? Zikui. You can say hechzer kaspi, a monetary return, but when you're saying lachzir, with regards to returning a piece of item, lachzir im hechzer kaspi. Hechzer kaspi is the best way to say that if you don't want to use the word zikui, store credit or credit. Zikui, by the way, can mean both store credit and credit. It's a little ambiguous, especially if you pay by credit card, because the idea is if you're asking to lachzir something for zikui, you need to clarify, is that store credit or is that going to back on my credit card? Ellen, how do you say shear? As I've said before, Hebrew does not have a huge amount of words. Shear is simply dak, thin. Okay, shear is the same. You'll use the same word dak to describe something that's shear as it is thin. Miri, how do I say this is too see-through? See-through, you're going to say transparent. The word for transparent, which is shakuf. Okay, something that is transparent is shakuf. So you would say ze shakuf midai. It is too see-through. Great question. How about a down vest outerwear? You're also going to say vest or elionit. You're going to use that other word we had here. Where was that word? Elionit. Elionit is going to best describe a vest in the sense of something you put on over. You could say Elionit Ava, a thick vest. Also keep in mind, folks, it's Israel. Even though it does get cold, it's only cold for a few weeks out of the year. It's too hot to wear a vest. And I'm saying that in mid-May, living in Tel Aviv, a down vest that you're probably used to from North America or the UK, or your North Face or your Patagonia, whatever it is, those are lovely. And it's great to know when Americans are in town because they're wearing them proudly, but that is not something that the average Israeli is going to wear because it's just too hot. But if you do want to buy one in Israel, you're going to ask for an elionit or a vest, either one. But great question. Aryeh, how do you say an undershirt? You wouldn't. You could say a chultza tachtonit, or it's not. The concept isn't really there. Keep in mind also that despite I wear a mekufteret all the time, a button-down shirt, Israel is not the most formal of places when it comes to wear. That includes things like undershirts and vests and things like that. You can simply ask for t-shirts. You can simply ask for a chultza daka, chultza t-shirt daka, a thin t-shirt. There is no separate class for undershirts that you will see. Even if you're buying, for example, a 6-pack of Calvin Klein shirts, like regular t-shirts that are to be used as an undershirt, the label in Hebrew is not going to say anything different or unique that's going to indicate this is an undershirt versus a t-shirt. In Hebrew, in Israel, more importantly, we don't have such a distinction because Israel hasn't caught up like that apparel-wise. Anonymous, what is the difference between Kabbalah and Cheshbonit? Great question. That is a tax issue. That is not a semantic issue, that is a tax issue. Kabbalah is simply a receipt. Cheshbonit is when it comes with certain tax issues and tax information on it, and it's usually a more itemized receipt that's used for tax purposes. Usually it's called a cheshbonit mas, right? Because it has to do with mas, taxes. For the everyday layperson, cheshbonit and Kabbalah are the same thing. But if you are a regular person, not owning a business, not buying something for a business purpose, it's going to be a Kabbalah. If you are buying something with the potential to use it as a business expense, that's a cheshbonit, in which case that is a different topic, that is finances. Andrew, for online sales, how do you find out if shipping is included? Andrew, and for everyone else, the wonderful thing about shopping online is even if it's an Israeli company, you can use Google Translate and it will say on it, if it doesn't, shipping, in Hebrew, we say dmei mishloach. Mishloach is shipping or delivery. Dmei is money. Okay, dmei mishloach is shipping fee. Dmei is also fee, by the way. That's another way to best translate it. Dmei mishloach, kalul, included, not included. Let me just write that as we're talking about it, because that's an important one if we're talking about online shopping. Dmei, just give me a second, folks. Dmei mishloach, kalul. Delivery fee, included. Let me just make this bigger. Oh, where'd it go? Make this bigger as well. Just 1 second. There we go. Mishloach kalul. Okay. Dmei mishloach and kalul. Great words to add to this list. Dmei mishloach, delivery fee. And kalul is an adjective. It means included, right? So if it says dmei mishloach kalul, it means delivery fee included. If it's not included, dmei mishloach lo kalul. Great question. Ava, would it be ani mistaderet or simply mistaderet? Great question. In Hebrew, when you're using the word mistaderet and you're saying it as a statement rather than a question, you're referring to yourself, right? So the ani is redundant, right? Because remember in Hebrew, we don't have the verb to be in the present tense. So mistaderet is the verb that you're saying, and it's including the pronoun I. You can say ani mistaderet, and it's perfectly all right. You can also just say mistaderet if someone asks, do you need help? Okay, either is perfectly all right. Ani mistaderet for a woman, or simply mistaderet for a woman. For a man, ani mistader or mistader. David, what is the word for changing room? Well, great question, David. First off, you can figure this out on your own simply by the geography of a clothing store, not to be too flippant about this, but if you're in Israel and you're in a clothing store, you can figure out where the clothing store is and you will see the sign for it. It's the same anatomy of a clothing store around the world. It will be called different things depending where you are. Some of them will call it a cheder halbasha. That verb for lahalbish we've had before. It'll take the word cheder, room, and lahalbish, to dress up, to dress someone. So a dressing room, cheder halbasha, or it's going to say ta'e medida. It's going to take the verb limdot, to try on, and it's going to use the word ta. Ta means a cell or a shelf or a box in different contexts, but ta'e medida is a ta medida is a changing room in the sense of like the individual space right behind the curtain or door, rather than a cheder al-basha, which contains ta'e medida. But both of those are going to be used, and if you don't remember either of those, you just simply see where people are waiting in line. But also, if you're going to a major store here in Israel, all you have to say is efshar limdot. right? If you're totally lost, you just ask someone who works there, אפשר למדוד. Can I try this on? Okay. Steve asks about afod and afoda. Again, afod is sometimes used for a vest when it comes to emergency vehicles. Like an afod is one of those bright yellow emergency vest that you would wear if you're stranded on the side of the road. That's included in all first aid kits here in Israel. That's not everyday clothing, so that's why I didn't include it here. And an ephod is more biblical in use. You're not going to hear that very often. Again, remember, folks, Israelis don't dress up pretty regularly. So I didn't include here the words for suit. I didn't include the words here for a formal gown. Okay, it's not that you yourselves aren't going to wear those. It's that everyday Hebrew, because everyday life in Israel doesn't include those things. So if that's really important for you, by all means, please look it up on your own. Again, and that goes to the next person asking, wearing a tie. I'm a big fan of wearing ties. I have a huge collection of both neckties and bow ties. I didn't include those words because rarely do people wear ties in this country. There is a separate verb for it. You can look those up. I promise you'll find them on your own in any standard dictionary, but I didn't include it here because the vast majority of Israelis simply don't. Not that they shouldn't, they just don't. Donna, does button down mean the shirt has buttons all the way down? How to say button down collar or spread collar? Great question. Again, Donna, same reply as what I said before. Israelis aren't that particular. They may dress well, but they aren't that sophisticated by and large when it comes to these things. You would simply just combine these two words together. So you would take the word for tzavaron, right, collar, and you would add tzavaron im kaftorim, right? Like I have a button down collar right now. I would not have any other way to say that to a shop attendant except either saying tzavaron im kaftor or tzavaron mekuftar. Remember, we just had that before. A tzavaron in normal sense is any sort of collar, and it's not button down, meaning a spread collar, like you asked. But again, that sophistication, that nuance is just not here in the apparel offered for sale in Israel. In some places it is, in which case they'll ask you im or bli kaftor, with or without a button, but that's a very individual case. Nancy, what is the shoresh of to shrink? As you see here, Nancy, it's lehit kavetz, so it means that the root is kaf vav tzadi. It's two vavs to make sure that you pronounce it as lehit kavetz, as a vav and not as anything else, but it's kaf vav tzadi. Okay. By the way, Nancy, and for everyone else, if you go to that website pe'alim.com and you type in these verbs, it will give you the shoresh of all the words you're looking for, including nouns and adjectives. It's a really useful website. Shana, you can ask what time do you close, but you can simply also ask what time are you open till. It's the same question. Okay. Just looking also is mistadel or mistaderet, right? When you say I'm doing all right, that's also implying I'm just looking. You can it's simply say that. You can say I'm perusing, but honestly, mistadel or mistaderet will mean I'm just looking. Okay, I'm actually going to write that in so that it's abundantly clear. I'm just looking. When said as a statement. Okay, let me just do that here. I'll just pull that. Great. Okay, we have a lot of people asking for very specific words here. Again, I am not a human dictionary. Thank you for being so interested in other words for vocab, but I promise you, everyone who just asked specific words for items of clothing, you can look it up in the dictionary. Even Google Translate with all of its faults, you will find it there. We have to call it break here as it's past 9 o'clock here in Israel. Thank you all so much for joining. As always, you can get a recording of this lesson in the next 1 to 2 days on youtube.com. You can go over the vocab all on your own as many times as you would like. Please join us next week where we'll have another lesson. If you have any specific requests for topics that we haven't gone over or you'd like us to review, please be in touch with us via email at nefesh b'nefesh. Thank you all, and lehitraot. See you all very soon.